Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय श्री हरिनाम प्रभु की जय। I know when I film. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yeah, that's a very good distance.
Can I sit here?
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming here today on behalf of ISKCON Bhaktivedanta Manor and our educational wing, School of Bhakti. We'd like to give a warm welcome to everyone who's assembled here for this really, really special occasion, and of course for all those who are watching us online. It's been a long wait. Obviously, we've been going through some interesting times, but by Krishna's grace, Radha Gokulanda's grace, the manor is slowly starting to open up and get back to its normal devotional activities. And so, with all this in mind, we thought this is such a blessed occasion. We have one of our long-standing leaders of the manor who's been guiding the Manor Yatra, has actually spent so many years actually spending his blood, sweat and tears, I guess, trying to actually really develop the Manor Yatra. We hope that obviously he sees this as a home from home. Obviously in recent years he's been based mainly in Hungary. But if we can please give a big loud Haribol for one of our beloved leaders, His Holiness Sivarama Swami Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Haribol. His Holiness Sivarama Swami Maharaj ki. Jai. Maharaj, so nice to have you here. This kind of feels like a homecoming because I'm sure for a lot of the devotees here, it is like a homecoming to see you back here with us. We hope that now things are open up more. We'll be seeing you more frequently, coming and visiting us, guiding us, inspiring
Hare
us.
Krishna.
So this month, Maharaj has been very, very merciful. As you all know, Maharaj's time is very, very stretched. But he's agreed to do 4 exclusive talk show sessions with the Manna with School of Bhakti each Sunday around this time at 5 p.m. on a different topic relating to Krishna consciousness. So today, the topic is on Krishna consciousness, specifically this whole ongoing, it's in the zeitgeist right now, isn't it? The whole science versus spirituality dichotomy. So today there's going to be a talk on that. And it's kind of following up on the debate that Maharaj had in 2015 with our other esteemed guest, His Grace Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu. Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu, of course, is also one of our up-and-coming leaders of our yatra, also been mentoring, guiding so many of us, especially the younger generation. So we've got amazing speakers here today who are going to discuss Krishna consciousness. I'm sure it'll be beneficial for everyone. Before we get into the debate, just a few things, few house rules. We are still not out of the woods yet in terms of health and safety, so please maintain social distancing. At the end, so this is how it's going to work. We're going to have a discussion for about roughly 1.5 hours. Then there'll be half an hour where we can have Q&A. So we'll be fielding questions from the audience as well as online as well. After about half an hour, then we'll conclude the session. There's refreshments, well, drinks on that side, to my right and to my left. And then Maharaj will be here on the book table to do some book signings for those who are inspired to obviously purchase one of Maharaj's inspiring books. There's quite a selection there. Now, for those of you who've been here on festival times, you know how when we do Abhishek, we have to be very clear when we do the going around the book table. Strictly, it's in a queue going around the periphery of the table from the right-hand side. Okay, just like when you do Abhishek on the stage here. Okay, so you go in a line.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, you go in a line around that way, and there will be stewards there to make sure that social distancing is maintained for everyone's safety. Once you finish, then you can go through the gangway. There's also a School of Bhakti table there. You can see what's on offer there in terms of our courses, workshops, and things as well. And obviously, if you are going to, talk after the session, mingle, whatever, please be cautious. Make sure that always maintaining social distancing at all times. So without further ado, I think we can get started on the session.
Okay, so I'll begin.
Yeah, so give one big round Haribol for His Holiness Sivarama Swami Maharaj and His Grace Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu. Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Just before we begin, very impressive. It's the first time I've been here. I think it was 40 years, 41 years ago when I came to the UK. And a lot of devotees who are here some of you who are here will remember that, yes, many Vaishnavis sweated a lot of blood and tears in order to actually have the right to even be here, what to speak of to then construct this really beautiful building. It was very impressive. It was a good feeling coming down from the manor and to actually see this and see so many people milling about. In the meantime, I hope everyone is obviously taking care of themselves. You're seated pretty well. I don't know if everyone's socially distanced, but you're more socially distanced than I was in the aisle of a airplane. Stewardess telling everybody standing up that they should be socially distanced. It doesn't work. But it's lovely to be here. And we thought that rather than have lectures, there's so many lectures that you have access to, wonderful seminars, one of the benefits of this whole COVID crisis, that devotees are online. There are so many lecturers, sannyasis, leaders, Vaishnavis giving classes, seminars. So I thought discussion with Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu, and we all discussed the threesome and then a foursome and some other sum that actually could do something a little different. And I have people coming up to me, well, of course I'm not all over the world now, but when I go to India or anywhere, he says, yeah, I remember when you had this argument with this devotee, debates, people like to hear debates. I think it keeps everyone awake a little more than otherwise they tend to. So anyway, I just wanted to say a few words. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I've waited a couple of years to come back. Wasn't very easy coming here, but anyway, here we are. Let's begin. And since the title is very accusatory, let those who are actually making the accusation begin.
Thank you very much. So there's a few things I want to discuss in the dialogue that we're going to have today, because I have a great concern about the way that certain groups who have beliefs, ideals, ideas, which are intangible, cannot be proven, and which they try to push onto other people as well. So, actually, why don't we start like this? I'm just thinking, you're based in which country? Which country are you based in?
Right now I'm in Hungary.
In Hungary, okay. So you flew in a few days ago? Okay. First class, business class?
This was cattle cart.
And I understand that you're not staying on the ground, so you're staying close by, is that correct? Okay. So you drove in, I assume. Mercedes? Mercedes? Lexus? What was the...
What is it, Varshana? What's your car? Put it this way, I couldn't straighten out my legs.
Okay. Fair enough. I imagine also in Hungary you have people that you need to stay in touch with, emails, Zoom calls.
We have no Mercedes, no Lexus.
Okay. But of course staying in touch, so you probably have a laptop, iPhone, etc. So
Right there.
So
recording everything you're saying.
So you're flying around on planes, driving around in your whatever vehicle, using your Apple products, and yet you have the audacity to come here and to argue against science. Literally everything that you do is being enabled by scientific discoveries. Doesn't that make you a hypocrite?
My main concern is scientists who have a unfounded philosophy that material progress makes people happy. And despite the fact that I may have this telephone, no one goes flying around the world in the COVID era. So I'm not flying anywhere, neither will I fly very much anymore. But I use the products of science because I have the right to use it, because I use them for the right purpose. You have the audacity to use it for the wrong purpose, to mislead people that science will make them happy and that progress is actually making people happy, but it's not making people happy. Otherwise, you wouldn't have so many psychiatrists, you wouldn't have so many doctors, especially in here. you wouldn't have so many problems today, which are actually being caused by science. Your COVID is being caused by science. Your whole environment is being destroyed by science. Not because of the telephone, not because of the car, but because of the way that you use it, and because you have the nerve to say that material progress will make people happy, and you brainwash them. You brainwash them from the time that they're not in our school, in the school system that we have around us. You teach children to be consumers, to be producers. You mislead them into thinking that they're actually going to be very happy if they follow on like their parents who are spending half the time with psychiatrists because they're not happy. And they're also divorced, and they're unstable, and they're taking Xanax half the time. And that's the result of your philosophy of science. We have a philosophy by which we also use science. But your philosophy of science is that this is what the goal of life is. Our philosophy of science is that we will use science to enable people to achieve the goal of life, which is self-realization. So why are you misleading people?
Nice try. Nice try. I see what you're doing. What you like to do is build up an argument and say about 100 different things, thinking I won't notice what you're doing. But you're wrong.
Well,
Let's
tell me
go
what
back.
I'm doing.
Let's go back. So, for example, when you bought this Apple phone, look me in the eye and tell me that you didn't feel some good feeling about it.
I didn't feel any good thing.
You didn't
about
feel
it.
anything.
Huh?
You didn't feel anything.
No.
But that's because you're
I
unusual.
didn't feel anything.
That's because you're unusual.
Huh?
I know many people, when they buy a product, it gives them a certain sense of joy. In fact, what we're doing with science,
What is joy?
what we're doing with
What
science.
is joy?
Is it okay for me to finish my point? Is that okay?
I'm asking you what is your, just in case you don't get lost, what is
I'm
joy?
not going to get lost. I know many people around the world are very glad that science is progressing the way that it is. Because what they're seeing is that by scientific progress, we're able to make more crops grow in a certain area of land. We're able to make sure that people are protected from natural disasters. Many people...
The natural disasters that you caused.
Let me finish. So, natural disasters. And so I think that if you were to do a survey of the average person, they will tell you that science is making our life better. And not only that, but in the future, we're going to have artificial intelligence. We'll be able to predict situations. We'll be able to predict health situations. Now, can you really tell me that that's not progress, Swami?
Yes, it's not progress because you don't know where you're going. Progress means you're getting somewhere where you should be going. Just because someone has a feeling, so-called, that you think that someone's feeling good, but are you actually going in the right direction? So when kids are eating chocolate cake all day long, just because they're getting a good feeling, is that actually good for them? What is the goal of life? And what is the purpose of life? And when you talk about the purpose of life, then you can say about whether people are actually going in the right direction. Just because people get some kind of joy out of purchasing a telephone. That's a real shame that that's what joy is about in the world today. There's a lot more joy to be had than purchasing a telephone. And when life has become so cheap that you have to get gadgets, and that's where joy comes from, or that you communicate with someone on the far end of the world who you call a friend, who you've never met, never going to meet, and have no personal connection with him, that's joy. There's a lot more joy to be had. And therefore, I came back to the point is what is joy? And in order to know what is joy, first you have to start off with the first question is what are you? Who are you? What is your identity? Because when you talk about economic development or you talk about scientific development, scientific advancement, but what is the point of scientific advancement in relationship to us, in relationship to all of these people? Who are they and what is their purpose in life? because you may have artificial intelligence, and that may be a real step up from your current level of no intelligence. So at least some machines will have some intelligence, because intelligence means to know who you are. Did you teach anyone in school who they were? Is there a course in grade school, high school, university that teaches people who they are?
Okay.
Answer my question.
Okay.
Is there a course?
Okay. I'm getting there. I'm
Is
getting
there
there.
a course?
I'm getting
Just
there.
no. Here you just say yes or no.
There are courses.
No,
Because
tell me
no,
yes
in
or
our
no.
schools, we teach evolution. In our schools, we teach that because of
I'm
fossil
not talking
samples.
about monkeys. I'm talking
No.
about the course. Tell me, is there a course that says who you are, self-identity 101? No. Then we can move on. Just say no. It doesn't happen. That's the truth. Now, you be honest. It's the truth. There is no course. No one, not only here in this huge big city, but no one on this planet teaches people who they are. And therefore, you kidnap their intelligence and you kidnap their identities and their souls to turn them into consumers.
I disagree. I think that the best way to proceed is to look at the alternative. What we do is hard science. You understand? So you see this phone?
Say that again.
What we do is hard science. You can tangibly see the results.
What results?
Let me just finish what I'm saying. So whether it's a laptop, whether it's a microwave oven, whether it's some kind of technical gadget that you can use, everyone can see it's objective. Now that's not brainwashing. That's not telling people what to believe. As opposed to you, who give people some kind of philosophy, idea, dogma, concept, all of these intangible things which no one can touch, taste, feel, or experience. So I actually think it's pretty rich to try and give this kind of, let's turn the argument in his direction, when you're speaking about a process that is by nature intangible. Let me put it this way. If there is this God, why doesn't he show up? Where is your God? Where is he? If he's so real and people can have, he wants people to know him, where is your God?
Okay, let's go back to philosophy and a vision of reality or life. It's not that religion or spirituality, which, by the way, you never got into this whole topic. I hope you're coming back to it, because that's what he's been advertising, that we're talking about spirituality and science. You have a philosophy. Science has a philosophy.
Science has proof.
No, listen. You go back to school and you'll find many courses on the philosophy of science. So you can open up your books. Science is also based on a certain philosophy. And there are different types of philosophies, but the overall philosophy of science is called materialism. And that is that ultimately happiness can be found in matter, and you will increase the quality of your life by material pursuit, and particularly by the enjoyment of this body. Now, it's a fact that science has made leaps and bounds, call it advancement. It has produced so many other things. I would have never believed such a thing would have existed 50 years ago as this telephone. But the fact is, and that's also a fact, you can ask your psychiatrist, you can ask your doctors, you can ask your therapists, that the quality of people's life is decreasing.
How do you know?
Be quiet.
How do you know?
The quality of their food, the quality of their food is decreasing. It's chemicals. You're not eating food, you're eating chemicals, paint, and stimulants. Food, water, some of these older people here never bought water in a shop. They drank water out of the tap. Now, you don't do that anymore, and you don't dare do that because of science. Similarly, everything that we actually have in terms of quality of life, I'm fortunate enough to wear silk, a himsa silk, by the way. And, but other people generally wear plastic. I see you're also wearing plastic. How many?
From Marks and Spencer's, though.
For Marks and Spencer's, yeah. Marks and Spencer's doesn't handle this kind of stuff. So, philosophy does have a science. science does have a philosophy. It is a philosophy. You could call it a religion because it's unproven. In fact, just the opposite is coming, that the air has become unbreathable, the food has become uneatable, the water has become undrinkable, the world has become unlivable. All glories to science. You know what all glories means? All glories to science. And that's the quality of the life of all of these people. You may be looking at your telephone and getting a thrill, but in the meantime, you're dying, breathing the air that we're breathing right now. So the quality of life of science hasn't improved, and the basis of science, which is the belief why we're going forward in this direction and have been going forward since the Industrial Revolution, is that this will make people happy, and it is not making people happy, despite the fact that you may get a thrill looking at your telephone. Go ahead. So there is a philosophy, and that philosophy you can call a religion. It's the religion of science, which also really goes off on some weird tangents, like, you know, your grandfather being an ape and so on.
Okay, you want to try and argue that? Okay, let's go.
You go ahead.
Let's go. So,
but do you understand the point?
I understand the point, but I'm going to...
You have, first of all, a religion that you follow, the religion of science.
I
and
said
second,
that we
results
create something
of the religion.
tangible. I said we create something tangible. What has religion or spiritual, you can call it what you want. What have you created that's
but
tangible,
you've created
that's helping
something
these people in
tangible.
society?
You may create something tangible. This is tangible. But the use of this tangible thing is not making people happy. That's tangible. And that's fact. And you're evading these points. And this is not, I'm not a scientist, but this is what your scientists tell us, that people are less and less happy than they were before. And that's a fact. Now, what are you going to do about that?
Okay, so let's look at this.
So do we accept that or not?
Let's look at it.
Do we accept that? That's what the scientists say.
Look at
that
it.
is what your tangible science
Let's
says.
look at it. So you're trying to argue that science and the scientific progress is not making people happy.
Science is a religion. It's a
Then
faith.
what about your alternative? Because you're talking about, you know, this kind of belief in a supernatural being, whatever it is. You didn't answer my question. I asked you. I said, where is your God? I said, if he exists and he wants people to know that he exists.
Where's your prime minister?
Which I assume that he does.
Where's your prime
Where
minister?
is he?
Where's your prime minister?
Our prime minister, we can locate him. He exists.
My God, you can locate him also. How far away is your prime minister?
Somewhere in 10 Downing Street.
Okay, well, this one's just around the corner. It's right over here. You wanna locate it? You wanna see God? I'll show you God. He's just right over here. He's 200 yards away.
That thing you're talking about, 200 yards away, that is a physical substance. It has been made by a person.
You
So
want
you're
things
telling me
tangible. You wanted something tangible. He's very tangible. Can you go talk to your prime minister?
If he comes and visits the manor, maybe I can.
Well, maybe we'll invite him, but usually they come to visit our God. That's what the last one did.
I can see you're going to be stubborn. So what we'll do is we'll take a
Truth does not mean stubborn.
So we'll take a certain angle on this. I've noticed that you like to be in front of the camera.
No, I don't like to
I've
be in
seen your
front of
social
the camera.
media videos. I heard that you
Why do you assume I like to be in front of a camera?
I heard that you like to style yourself as ISKCON's answer to Jay Shetty.
Say that again.
That you like to be on social media. Social media is technology. If you think that this stuff is so bad, why are you all over this platform?
I didn't say that it was so bad. I'm saying what you're using it for is bad. What I'm using it for is good. I have the right to use it. You don't. I deserve to use it because I'm using it for the right purpose. But you're using it for the wrong purpose.
That's your opinion.
It is my opinion, but the question is my opinion the truth or not? So one of us is right, one of us is wrong. It's just like a knife. I can use a knife for cooking, and you can use a knife for killing somebody. There's nothing wrong with a knife. So who's using all of this technology for the right purpose? Who has the right to use it? I'm directing people to go back to the original point that I made that you still keep running away from, to understand who they are, because unless you know who you are, you can't actually have a solid footing in life, and you can't actually start heading off to any particular direction. What's a line? How do you define a line? What did you learn in school?
What's that got to do with
Arithmetic. How is a line defined?
the distance between 2 points?
Very good. So we start off with the first point is who am I, and the other one is where am I going? And the shortest line, the shortest distance between the two is the line, and that's what life is about. Life is how to get from knowing who you are to ultimately attaining the purpose of life.
I disagree. I think that life is about having a situation where you're materially comfortable, you're able to experience all the fine things that life has to offer. You have art, you have literature, you have relationships. I think all of this is just your dogma and just your opinion.
Prove it. You just said you disagree. Prove it. I pointed out to you that your empiric scientists say that the result is not that people are enjoying. The result is that people are becoming more and more frustrated.
Not everyone.
You may have that telephone, the great majority, at least those who are sane. You may not like, or you may consider that the internet as well as social media is very valuable, but at the same time your psychiatrists say that it's a destructive drug. At least the way it's being used by people who are looking at it 450 times every day, walking around with it as if it's glued to their hands.
So you talked about destructive use.
Who are you?
You talked about destructive...
Unless you know who you are, how do you know where to go and what the use of different things is?
So you talked about destructive use. I actually think that's a really bad thing that you could have said. Because if I look at it, what we see is so much destructive use of this so-called belief in some supernatural power. Even to this day, we're hearing about situations where people are in fear for their life because they happen to be of a different, let's say, belief system. So if your religion is so beneficent and useful for society, how do you possibly square that with what we see go on now and what we've seen go on throughout history?
How do you square science being so destructive? What about atom bombs? What about Hiroshima? What about all of the weaponry that all of those religious people have been access to and being sold to by politicians and by people who are getting very, very rich by selling all kinds of weapons and also by promoting war in order to have a good commercial situation back home? Is it the weapons or the religion, or is it the people? So my point is, just like science is misused by people, religion is misused by people. It's not the people that's the problem. Excuse me, it's not the religion that's the problem, and it's not the particular item that's the problem. It's the people who use it because they don't know what it's for. And similarly, people don't know what real religion is about. And real religion is not about war, and it's not about persecuting anybody, and it's not about harming people. It's about letting people, wherever they are, in whatever part of the world they're in their own particular culture, go from knowing who they are to understanding that the goal of life is to love God and to know God and to become knowers and lovers of God who exists, if you want to know him. Just like your prime minister exists, if you want to know him.
So then would you say that the religious experiment has failed, considering the number of people...
Not an experiment.
Considering
it's
the
not
number,
an experiment.
Considering the number of people in religions who, to your point, I'm going to give you some concession, who, to your point, are quote unquote misusing it. Would you not say that that project has failed because there's so many people in the name of religions, whatever religions, who have misused it? Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. But if I did agree with that, you'd have to agree that science has failed. Because your science is causing so much destruction around the world.
What about the good of science? I think you're cherry picking.
No. Stick to the point. People misuse science. People
Some
misuse
people.
so many things. Some people. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. But the overall direction in which science is being systematically taught to people, and the purpose of silence and the value of science, that it's not a means to know God and love God, it's something to replace God. And therefore, and that's a speculation, that's a complete faith, because you haven't proven it. You have no proof that that's the case. You have just the opposite, and that is that people are becoming more and more disillusioned with life now than ever before, despite the fact that they have science. Why? Because science on its own cannot replace God. Why? Because people are servants of God. So if we go back to who we are different from this body. We are spiritual living entities. We are eternal servants of God. And our life is meant to learn how to know who God is and to love God. Know God and love God. Just because you don't see him right now doesn't mean he doesn't exist. Prime Minister is not sitting right here. That doesn't mean that he doesn't exist, but he is somewhere. Although he's not going to come running just because you want to see him. And neither is God going to just come running just because we're sitting up here and you're making a challenge. But you can qualify yourself to see God, and that's what science should be used for. But when you misuse science to replace God, then people are unhappy as they are because they become frustrated. And ultimately they die. You probably noticed that ultimately everyone comes to that point where they've died. And what have they achieved? What has been the value of all that accumulation? What is their telephone doing them? What is their computer? What is the technology? What is the artificial intelligence? How are you solving the real problem of life? Death. Are you solving the problem of life? Death. The people, no one wants to die. Why don't you solve that problem?
Okay, good point.
Okay.
So you're saying that we have to solve this problem called death. So my question, the obvious question would be, for those people who engage in what you call real religion, don't they still die?
No, they don't die. Because they know that
They
they're
don't die?
spiritual entities. They know that
You're
their
telling me
body
they don't
dies.
die?
Yes, they don't die. It's your body that dies. You don't die. But you identify with this body, therefore you think that you die. So the real solution to this problem of perpetual birth and death is to ultimately become a lover of God and to go back to God. And there the repeated process of dying is solved. Whereas you identify with this body, you die as a scientist in this life, and you simply come back again to die again, to die again, to die again in so many different types of bodies. So yes, you bring an end to death by becoming self-realized and taking on your eternal spiritual identity, because that is eternal and it is spiritual. But you don't invest time in the science of spiritual life. Forget about religion. We're talking about the science of spiritual life. Let me finish. You've invested, how many years have you gone to school?
20.
20. That's 2 more than me. I was smarter. I got out before you. You invest 20 years in scientific development, different types of science. It may be economic science, it may be social science, but ultimately you invest no time in spiritual science, in the science of the self. And I'm talking about science, and there's a real science.
I'm glad you said what you said.
So you never went to that school. That's the problem.
I'm glad you said what you said, because you brought up something that really annoys me. What annoys me the most is when people who are into religion or spirituality try to make out that it's in some way scientific. I think that's an insult to the scientific community. As we said before, what we do is provable and testable. What you do is in your head, is in your brain cells. So how can you possibly suggest that spirituality is scientific? How?
Because you do the experiment. And you get the result, just like you said. And that's science. But no one's taught you the basic theory or the principles. No one shows you how to do the experiments, so how do you expect to get the result?
So let's keep it real then. How do you know that this so-called experiment you're doing is not just your imagination?
How do you know that your science is not just your imagination? Because you're just imagining that all of this is really nice, and you're trying to imagine away all of the very destructive results of your science, which you still haven't. I brought it up about 3 times, and you keep ignoring it because you don't have any answer for it.
I have an answer for it.
It's just your imagination.
I have an answer for
But
it.
it's not an imagination, it's the reality I experience. So you may want to challenge what I'm doing. I'm drinking a glass of water. You may say, well, how do I know that it's not my imagination? But there has to be some sense of reality to the things that we relate to. I experience it. I see it. I know it. You're not doing the experiment, so why are you challenging me? You do the experiment, and then you see. You're never going to know what I experience, but you can't argue that it's not real unless you've done it.
Interesting point. So let's consider this.
This is science.
Let's consider
This is spiritual science.
So let's
But
consider.
you have to be willing to do the experiment.
So let's consider.
But are you willing to do the experiment?
Has anyone ever done your experiment and got a bad result?
Yes, when they did it wrong. Because anyone who does an experiment the wrong way doesn't get the right result. They get the wrong result. But if people do it the right way, then you get the right result because it's science. Science means
That
you always
irritates
get
me
the
so
right
much
result
when you use those words.
if you go the right way. So my question to you is, you're here attacking me. This whole thing is like an attack on me and an affront to all these ladies and gentlemen over here that are sitting here. Are you coming off on the basis of real knowledge, something that you've experienced, something that you've tried, something that you've done? Do you know that spiritual science doesn't work? Do you know that Krishna consciousness doesn't work? Do you know that God doesn't work? Was that just your belief? Because you haven't proven it. Have you disproved that God exists? Have you disproved that people can't see God and talk to God? It's not scientific, is it? In other words, you haven't come onto me on a scientific basis. You just come onto me with some dogma. You've charged me with something that you have no experimental proof on. And you have not disproved that God exists. You just don't believe it. That's your belief. That's your faith that God doesn't exist.
Well, I would say to that is that there are literally unlimited possibilities in the world. The first step before we make any experiment is that we have to believe that something makes sense reasonably. And until I think it makes sense reasonably, I will not be wasting any time or any energy doing any experiment to prove anything.
How will you determine whether something makes sense reasonably?
It has to be logical. It has to make sense. It has to be something that has a track record to it.
Have you heard of the Bhagavad-Gita?
Yes.
Have you read it? You read it and tell me it's not logical, and you tell me it's not systematic, and you tell me it's not scientific. It only talks about science, things that are directly perceivable. Komara, Jovara, Jara. Your body's changing all the time. Do you change? You're the same person. So what is it that doesn't change despite the fact that the body changes? You think different, you may look different, your intelligence is different, but there's something very essential, right, that doesn't change. Isn't that a reasonable argument?
It's reasonable.
It's genius. From the greatest genius.
Now that's an interesting statement. You said it's genius.
It's genius.
And you're talking about this book.
And it's scientific.
So
is it logical?
Where do you pick up
Tell
this
me,
book?
just tell me.
Where do you pick up
Is
the
it
book?
logical?
Where do you pick up the book?
Is it perceivable?
Can I buy a copy of the book?
Can you buy a copy? Sure, we'll give you a copy.
So
as long as you read it.
So that book that I can buy a copy of, it's been printed and written out by someone, right? Isn't it?
Printed and written out?
It's a physical artifact, it's an item. That book's been written by some person. You're telling me to live my life according to some book that's been printed in some factory somewhere that's been written by some person.
Every single scientific book is printed in a printing press, written by some people. And especially the fact is that your scientists keep revising everything that they know. This is not written by a person, this is written by God.
How do you know
God
it's written by
does know
God?
how to write. If you can write, he can write. God wrote the book.
Did you see him write the book? How do you know he wrote the book?
Because he says, I'm saying this. Tat Shrinu. Just listen to what I'm writing down. So, what's the problem with the books? There's no problem with the books. Everything that you know is based on books. But this book hasn't changed 5,000 years. Your book changes every 5 years. And it keeps updating knowledge. And you know what updated knowledge is called? It's called ignorance. Because knowledge doesn't need to be updated. Knowledge is always knowledge. It's not very scientific to have to update something because you know more, which means that before you knew less. So knowledge is not something that's updated.
Let's take a different angle.
Different angle. But
So-
this is science. Just go back. Komara, Jovara, Jara. It's always changing, isn't it?
You're always
The body's
speaking these
changing.
Indian words. Like, what do you mean? What are you
Yes,
talking-
we need to go back to points because the whole idea is that you're here making a challenge and we want to see whether you're right on your points or wrong. And you're wrong on all your points up to now. So at this point, isn't it very logical? The body changes, but something doesn't change. Whatever the something is. That's very logical, isn't it? And that's the first lesson. That something essentially myself, that's my essential being, something with which I identify throughout all my whole life, that doesn't change. This knowledge you haven't gotten in your 20 years of university. Well, you did when you dropped into Soho Street. But aside from that, nowhere in your school of educations did you receive this knowledge. And what a shame and what a violence that you've misled people to even know this very fundamental thing, that they are not this body. Because that then becomes very important, because science is based on the fact that you are this body. That's part of philosophy of science, that this is what we are, we live this one life, and then it's over. That's the philosophy of science. But now, if your identity is different, then your whole direction of science goes out the window. Then where does science go if you're actually not this body? But you're something else. You're a transcendent living entity that doesn't change, even though everything around it changes. So this is the first thing. This is the ABC. We got kids here in nursery school. They know. They know more than you know. They know this.
There's no need to be rude.
Just stating the facts.
So you talked about 100 different things there, but you tried to sneak through a few things that I wanted to go back to. So you said that I'm attacking you. Actually, I don't mind religious people. Some of my best friends are religious. But the issue I have is when religious people start going around telling everyone about it. If you want to have some dogma, why don't you keep it to yourself?
Are we having a COVID crisis?
What do you mean?
Just asking you a simple question. We have a COVID crisis.
Yes, we are.
Okay, are we telling other people about it?
That's different.
No, I asked you whether we're telling other people about it. I didn't make any analogy yet.
Okay, we are telling people about the COVID crisis.
And are we making people wear masks? And are we getting to the point of getting people vaccinated?
Okay, so what's your point?
Otherwise, you're not going to have a job in this company unless you get vaxxed. My point is that when people are facing a dangerous situation, then every civilized person tries to help them. And that's what our Sankirtan is about. That's what giving transcendental knowledge is about helping people who are actually in need. And people are in need because unfortunately they're not getting educated in school. They're learning ABCs, but they're not getting educated in spiritual science. So therefore someone else has to do it. And therefore we have to do it. And even though those people who come to us, we do it here, otherwise we take the school out on the streets. People need to be educated.
But what if they don't feel that? Because, for example...
What about the people who don't like wearing masks? It's a law. So when it's mandated, whether they feel like it or don't feel like it, they need it. What about kids who want to stay out and play until midnight? Do the parents let them? No. So just because people feel like doing something or don't feel like doing something doesn't mean it's necessarily good for them.
But you're implying that you know better what people need than they themselves.
Yes.
Isn't that really condescending?
No. No. Because for the most part, you haven't educated people. I fortunately been educated. I dropped out at year 18 and I came to this educational institution. You can see how beautiful this educational institution is. And I've been educated, and I've been going through this educational system for the past 45 years. And therefore, I know about this transcendental science, which unfortunately other people don't have the opportunity to be educated for. Why? Because they're being misdirected in another direction, that life isn't about going this way, life isn't about a straight line, life is about going around in circles, which is called samsara. And we want to save people from going around in circles like dogs chasing their tails. We want people to go to a straight line. So, yeah, if there's a cliff over there, and, am I smarter to tell the person not to go running off the cliff? That's not an issue of being smart or knowing better. It's an issue of reality. It's an issue of education. It's what people need. And you have to understand, you want to give people science, give them science. But don't make science the all in all. Explain to people what the real value of life is and make people happy by giving them transcendental knowledge. And if you do that, then you can wed your science and religion together.
Make people happy.
It doesn't have to be an either or
transcendental
situation.
knowledge. Okay, so you're saying that it doesn't have to be an either or. Make people happy by giving them transcendental knowledge. So my question is very simple. Are there people that you've given this transcendental knowledge to who are unhappy?
Who are unhappy?
Yes.
There may be some.
So doesn't that imply that your transcendental knowledge is not actually
Why
the
don't
thing
you
that
ask
makes
me
them
the
happy?
percentages?
Do you know the percentages?
Ask them. Okay, how many people who got transcendental knowledge are happy? Raise your hands. Okay, now
They're biased.
How many people are unhappy? Well, these are the people that you asked that we're giving to. Okay, so here it's a low percentage. There was nobody. Let's say it's 5%. So this 5% are unhappy. So what? Well, you got 100% people unhappy. So 5%. Some people don't do the experiment in the right way and so on. There's always going to be. But the overriding majority, look at the overriding majority. And you will have that with every religion. All right, in this religion, so many people are going out and they're killing other people. But that's not what the whole religion is all about. And that's not what the hundreds of millions of people in the world are doing.
The problem I have with this argument and with this idea of asking people if they're happy or not is because even if they are happy now, that could fade, okay? So you criticize me for saying that technology can give you some immediate thrill, okay? But my criticism back to you is that that could also apply to spirituality. You see people, whether it's they're going to the yoga studios, they're having a little bit of a fun time, but that person in their day-to-day job may not be feeling that way. So again, my point to you is, how do you know that your spirituality isn't just a temporary plaster over the fact that existence for an individual may be an unhappy experience? You're claiming that religion and spirituality makes people happy. My point is that it could just be in their imagination. They could be imagining things. They could be looking forward to some food afterwards.
But you could be imagining everything also. You could also be imagining that you're happy. You could also be imagining that this is actually called progress. You may be creating these things. They may be tangible. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's progress. That's one alternative. The other one is that it's regress.
Really?
Yes. And according to crime statistics, according to mental health statistics, according to medical statistics, everything is regressing. We got more wars, more people being killed. Where's the progress? If you're going to measure something in terms of its success, the measure in terms of the result, your scientific development, it may be creating so many tangible things that are doing so many things, but the ultimate result is you are destroying this world. And that's science. And what are you doing about that? You destroyed this planet with your philosophy. Aren't you ashamed of that? And aren't you ashamed to try to convince people that they should participate in that and continue in that? Don't you realize, can't you just admit there's global warming? I made a list of all the things that are intangible. People do not have the right to eat. They cannot eat food. They cannot guarantee their children a peaceful world.
Okay,
Why?
I will admit,
That's the result. That's the result.
I will admit that science has made mistakes, okay? But
No, it's a total failure. The scientists have made mistakes.
But
It's all a mistake.
we are going to improve tomorrow. Things will get better. Things will get better.
Things will get better. This is what you just argued with me about things being imagined. But right now, you're doing the same thing now. You're not going to change your strategy. Therefore, things aren't going to get better. Things are going to get worse.
We're learning every day.
Tomorrow, Greenland is going to melt completely. And we're going to have a big tsunami over here. And we may have, a beach right outside the door here. Because things are going to get worse. Why are they going to get worse? Because you're going to keep doing the same thing. Unless you start doing something different, and this is really ABC. Einstein said, you're crazy if you think you're going to get something different by doing the same thing. You keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same result. Do something different. And the something different is bring spiritual life into your scientific sphere and use science to further and benefit people's lives on the basis of spiritual knowledge, on the basis of a self-identity that is based on the Bhagavad-Gita, based on real information, not this faith that you say God doesn't exist, you don't believe in religion. These are all just superstitions. They're all faiths. There's nothing substantial that backs that up. They're just simply some charge that you throw up in the air, and then you want me to argue that and defend that. Why? It's an insult. Do something that you've proven. You've done an experiment and you've proven. You come here, you chant Hare Krishna for the last, how many years? 24 years, and you tell me it doesn't work. And it hasn't made your life better, and it hasn't changed your consciousness, your perception of life. So we're interested in changing the level of people's consciousness, that not being conscious of solely this body and solely of this world, but conscious of themselves, conscious of the Creator. You do believe that something comes from something, not that something comes from nothing, don't you?
Obviously.
So just like you're talking about artificial intelligence, and we have real intelligence. So the intelligence that we have comes from an intelligent Creator.
That's an assumption. Something comes from something. Yes, something comes from something. But how do you know that the first thing is a God? And If he does exist, then who created him?
Don't call him a God. Where does intelligence come from?
I think we're born with it. It's a natural faculty.
Well, where does it come from? And who designs the world that we live in? Does all of this design come from something unintelligent?
Could it not come by chance?
Science come about by chance? That telephone come about by chance?
That's different.
It's not different. Things don't come about by chance. Chance is not an explanation of how things come about. Chance is what they do in gambling, 50-50, chance, heads or tails, that's called chance. Things don't happen by chance. There's a chance or there's a statistical probability that something will happen, that's called chance, but that doesn't answer how it happens, right? 20 years of education, you can follow that. So that's not chance. Things don't happen by chance. You don't have any experience of anything happening by chance. How can you make a scientific statement, things just happen? Things don't just happen. Everything is created. You've been sitting here. How long have you been sitting here? You've been sitting for the last 57 minutes, 23 seconds, according to my high-tech telephone. Yes. And you've been sitting here telling me about how things happen. Scientists have actually created wonderful things. Now, who's the supreme scientist that has created this planet? That's created the scientist? Who's made the scientist's brain that allowed them to actually make these other things? Come about by chance? Things just sort of happen out of nowhere? Things don't happen by nowhere. Don't say that because it's not a scientific statement, because you can't prove it. You haven't seen anything come out of nothing. Or you haven't seen things just come together just by accident. Everything happens by design, and when there's design, there's a designer. This building, this chair, that telephone, all of these things, everything is designed by a designer, and we are sitting in the supreme design. We are sitting on this planet, and that's made by the supreme designer. That's just logical. You call them whatever you want.
If you say that everything's come by design, that really raises a big issue. Because we see...
Before you raise issue...
It raises a big issue.
Before we'll go to the big issue. First answer the question, is there a designer?
I'm going to hold on that.
No.
If everything...
You're avoiding answering the question.
If everything...
Is there a designer?
If everything is designed, it raises a big issue. Because we can look in the natural world and we can see that there's a lot of issues with the design. The fact that someone grows old, that's an issue with the design. The fact that there are species which become extinct, that's a big issue with the design. The fact that there are earthquakes and volcanoes and so on, that's a big issue with the design.
Listen,
are you still claiming?
I walked into this building 2 hours ago, and I saw a lot of design mistakes. That doesn't mean that there's no design to this building, and there's no designer. Just because they made mistakes doesn't mean there's a designer. There's still a designer, isn't it?
So you say the designer made mistakes? Is that what you're saying?
To this building, there are some mistakes. I'll walk around later on and find some more. But it was designed, wasn't it?
But then that suggests...
I know it was designed because I know the designer.
But that suggests...
But wasn't it designed?
That suggests the designer...
Mistakes or not, doesn't matter.
The designer has an issue, doesn't it?
We'll take that on, yes, say he's got issue, but there's a designer, right? There's a designer with issues. Now we'll deal with the issues. Is there a designer or not? Is there a designer? Who's got issues?
Let's see where you're going with the argument.
Is there a designer with issues? No.
Okay, with issues. Yes, with issues. There's a designer with issues. And if he's got issues, why should we follow him?
No. Is there a designer or not? Forget about following. Is there a designer or not? We're talking about the point. Design means designer. Fault or no fault. Isn't it? So you agree. There's a designer.
It's logical.
There's a design. It's logical. That's another way of saying yes. Okay. So we agree that there's a designer. Whether there's fault or not, that's your perception whether there's fault. Did he create the fault, or is it because you interfered? Did the designer create air pollution? No. Man interfered with the design, and therefore now we have air pollution, which never existed before. At least it never existed pre-industrial times. So what's to say that there's some imperfection? Forget about imperfection. That's the detail. That we can deal with. But the important thing is there is a designer. And now we call the designer God. And he's a very good designer because it goes down to the atomic scale. It goes up to the galactic scale. So he's a very good designer. So even if you think that he's made a few mistakes here and there, he's a lot better than you and your scientists.
So your argument seemed to be convincing, but you tried to sneak something in there. So what you did is you said, okay, these issues with the design, you said, that's my opinion. Then you gave the example, you said air pollution, that wasn't there, it's because we interfered. But there's many faults which have nothing to do with man. There's many faults which have nothing to do with man. I repeat that. So therefore,
like
isn't
what?
So, for example, the fact that we all die.
But that's,
how do you explain that?
I told you don't die. I told you that the soul is eternal. It's your body that dies. And the nature of
that's
this,
still bad.
Built into this design, you will notice that it's not just your body that deteriorates, but this building, mountains, planets, stars, solar systems, universes, they're all temporary. That's the nature of this design. There's another design that's eternal, where everything maintains. But right now here, including this body, is all temporary. And that's perfect.
Why is it perfect? How's it perfect?
It's perfect because it's serving its function according to a particular plan. But the soul inside the body, that which you agreed earlier is also logical and exists, that's eternal. Because you see it in this life, that it's constant and it doesn't change. So for the last how old are you now? Just a little kid when I first met you.
Okay, off camera.
So it's perfect. The design is perfect. The fact that it's temporary is part of the twofold design of the designer. There's one thing that's eternal, and this realm that we're in is temporary. And both of them are perfect.
How can it be perfect if it's temporary? Why didn't they just, if this designer is so benevolent, why not create one realm where everything is eternal? Why have a temporary situation? Because we all see that the temporary situation causes people a lot of suffering, doesn't it?
Because that makes for the completion of the absolute truth. The absolute truth is only complete if it has both temporary and permanent features. If it just has permanent, then it's incomplete. So it has to have permanent and temporary. It has to have infinitesimal and it has to have infinite. That makes things complete. Otherwise, you're just one alternate. So, but in any case, the whole point is that here in this temporary world, we have to realize that we, as well as everything that lives, is actually a spiritual nature, spiritual entity. And religion means to understand our spiritual identity and to understand how we get out of the entanglement of this temporary matter and stop identifying with this matter. And the problem with science, which is not the issue of the telephone or the airplane or the car, and yes, Mercedes are the best by far, is not the issue of those things. It's the issue of where are these things taking people? Are they misleading them, or are they actually helping them in their spiritual pursuit of life? To really understand their eternal spiritual nature and to go from this temporary, designed place, perfect place, to the eternal, non-dying place. And science, real science, is meant to help people make that shift. And when this type of science, say the mechanistic science, when it assists that, then then it's doing the right thing. But when it's not, then it's doing the wrong thing. And that's why I said earlier that I have a right to use these things. I have a right to fly in a plane. You don't. Because I'm flying in a plane to help people and to further the mission of the human form of life. And you may be flying in the plane, just like so many other people, to just get further entangled in this misidentification with matter, with this body, and this temporary world. And that's called education. So we want to educate people, and that's what really religion, the essence of religion, is about. All of these other things, what men do to religion, yeah, it's horrible. And what men do to men, and what men do to politics, and what men do to science, and what men do to so many other things. That's the problem. The problem with science is not science, it's man. It's the scientists. They're the problem. Not science is the problem. Scientists are the problem. Just like in the same way you're pointing out that with religion, what's the problem? That people are kidnapping religion, is misusing it for their own purposes instead of actually using the religion for the benefit of humanity.
I have one last question for you. Everything you said, I guess you could say that there's some logic to it, there's some reason to it. But one of the reasons why many people have an issue with spirituality is because it seems to be contradictory. So there's this idea, you talked about educating people and so on. It would seem to me that if this idea of educating people and bringing them to enlightenment is true, it would seem that your God is unfair. Because some people are not going to receive that education. Some people are going to get it, some people are not going to get that education. So that means that there's a bias. There's a bias here. And this is another reason why, as much as we recognize that science has its flaws, unless you can answer this question, I think many people will still have some skepticism about looking at any spiritual alternative. Do you have a response to that, Swami?
I have a response to everything. There's so many people around the world who are illiterate. What are you doing about that? What are you doing about it?
That's not my question. That's not the question I
No,
asked you.
it is. It's just a very easy answer. What are you doing about it?
Well, there are people trying to, teach them and train them.
Right. Well, that's what we're doing. Why aren't people all born with access to good quality education? It's just not the way of the world. It's not the way that things happen. There's answer for that. It's called the law of karma. So in the same way that some people immediately don't have access to material education, to good education, to clean water, and to other things, similarly, for similar reasons, people don't immediately have access to spiritual values, although you recognize that there are religions of all types all over the world. Religion is spread all over the world, and the pursuit of the spiritual, to one degree or another, exists everywhere. Whether we're talking about, in the interior, in Congo, or where we're looking at India, or look in Siberia, everywhere. People are looking for something more than the material. So it's there. But that's the whole idea is, yes, we should educate others. We should give others the benefit that we have ourselves. And the fact that everyone doesn't immediately have access to the same thing is not a flaw of the Creator. It's the flaw of the individuals. And we need to start taking responsibility for who we are, where we are, what we've done to this world, instead of blaming God for everything. And only God can be blamed by so many people for so many things and still be unaffected. Otherwise, people, they don't like to be, accused and be in such a unappreciated situation. Shamed. God shamed. The poor God. So we need to take responsibility. And that's where actually things start. That yes, we should change the quality of our life, and that's one of the aspects of science, one of the purposes of science, that man should change the direction of his fate. And that's the right idea. The problem is the direction is wrong. And the methodology is wrong. The methodology is that people are going to become happy by material acquisition and material progress, but that's a mistake. That's not going to make people happy. People are going to become happy when they go in the direction of self-realization, in pursuit of real truth, in pursuit of self-knowledge, in pursuit of the knowledge of their relationship with God. And when that's there, then people will actually be happy, and then they can bring along these other things, although these other things are not necessary. Now, I was in this same building before this thing ever existed. In fact, someone from Vodafone tried to walk into my office with a telephone that was this big in a suitcase, and he actually convinced me to try it.
See, that's progress. It's big, smaller now.
I would have never believed that that's happened. But it's progress, but life hasn't gotten better. As I mentioned before, the statistics are that the quality of life has not improved. Fine, communicate, but talk about God over that thing, and talk about God over social media, and don't talk about all kinds of other trivia that's wasting your rare human form of life, that's contaminating other people's consciousness, all kinds of useless things that are actually of no relevance to the purpose of life, that are a real distraction because you're wasting time. And that time you can't get back with your science. So you're not going to be traveling forward in time, you're not going to be slowing down time. We have the time's clicking away, clock is clicking away, and we only have so much time, and we need all the time we can get, because this science is much tougher than making a telephone. The science of self-realization is more challenging than a telephone, and knowing God is a lot more difficult than meeting your prime minister. Although it's just as real, but it's a lot more difficult. He's got a lot more security around him than your prime minister. I was very disappointed when he came walking in here.
Can everyone please give a big round of applause for His Holiness Sivarama Swami Maharaj and His Grace Buddha Bhavana Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you for taking the time out to do this wonderful talk. Obviously, for those of you who know Buddha Bhavana Prabhu, he's a very sincere, amazing spiritualist himself. To be fair, he was kind of taking the role of a devil's advocate, of course, just to, I guess it's really to help us actually to really grasp our own philosophy, because as we practice the spiritual tradition, we will be challenged with a lot of these queries. In fact, whether it's externally or within our minds as well. So thank you for helping us to kind of understand these difficult questions more and more. Buddha Mahaprabhu, I thought you
when I'm
you did
looking
very
in
well.
his eyes, I can see he doesn't believe what he's talking about. So what I got to do here?
I thought you acted very well, though, as a challenger. But anyway, thank you so much, both of you. So we've got some time to have a bit of questions answered before we conclude for today. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it alternatively. We'll have some from the audience, the live audience here, and of course those who are watching online as well. I can already see a hand being raised. So Rajesh Prabhu, I want you to first, Prabhuji with the in the back there with the glasses. Mr. Singh, I know, I know Mr. Singh. If Prabhuji can ask a question, then we'll go to online, then to Arika.
Thank you so much for this very nice
Oh, sorry, one more thing. All questions, whether it's online or live, directed towards Maharaj only, yeah?
Okay. So thank you so much for this very nice scientific conversation. I would like to take the side of my scientific friend and would like to ask you, put more questions. So there are 2 points I wanted to make. First one was the chance theory. Somewhat I would like to support that in the view that there is something called as law of natural selection. So that essentially means that the nature chooses, and how does nature choose is what scientists say happens by by chance, essentially. And the second point I wanted to make, if anything is scientific, then there is a process. You do the process and you get the same result as the outcome every single time, which means the sign is immutable, it is repeatable, and you get the same result at the end. But with spirituality, I have often seen people try a process and they get different results. Every single time they follow the same exact process. It doesn't explain to me sometimes that this is scientific. So thank you so much for taking these two questions.
Easier one question at a time, otherwise then we lose track. The first one is, you just said the same thing, natural selection, nature decides, and how nature decides is by chance. This is the most outrageous, unscientific, and unethical statement. It says you're just going around in a circle saying nothing. It says absolutely nothing. Nothing happens. Chance is not the answer to how events take place. Events don't take place because of chance, isn't it? Events don't take place because of chance. There's a chance that events take place. There's a big difference between the two.
My mic. Okay. I would agree with the later point that there is a chance that the events will take place.
No, there's not a chance that something's going to take place. You're just saying black is red. So there's not a chance that something's going to take place. There's a chance that something can't take place, but that doesn't answer why it takes place and how it takes place.
But that is the probability theory, no? You have a chance and
Theory
a combination.
Theory is not science.
No, that's a mathematical principle and a thesis called probability.
Theory is not science.
But that's what we use.
Mathematical or not, you still haven't said why it
because
happens.
That's the theory we have used practically.
It's a theory.
To fly aeroplanes.
Theory is not science. You're
it's
cheating.
an applied theory, and therefore it's called applied science.
It's not applied theory because you still haven't answered how it happens. You're cheating. And this is what science does. I know. I've been in school. I spent 6 years in university. I know what it's about, and I've heard it all. It's cheating. And what you're saying is unethical, it's unprincipled, and it's illogical. Why? Because you're brainwashed by having gone to education.
I studied math, and math I can see in front of me. I can see the equations, and I can know for certain that these equations give me certain outcomes, the balances, the left-hand side and the right-hand side. I can't do the same thing with the science when it comes to chances and the events. So this is where I wanted to understand a little bit deeper. Maybe you can prove me wrong.
Anyway, but mathematics doesn't tell you why things happen. Mathematics analyzes things, and mathematics goes in all fields of science, but it doesn't tell you why things are happening. So you need to come to the cause. Everything has a cause. What's the original cause? And that was one question that we didn't answer. The cause has no cause. You have to start there. Either you're starting with a Big Bang, either you're starting with a primordial soup, either you're starting with a black hole. You got to start somewhere that doesn't have a cause, because otherwise you just keep going back ad infinitum, and you got infinite regress. So you have to start at one point where it doesn't have a cause, and that, which is the original cause of everything, is God.
Thank you very much.
And it's intelligent. And the other point was, yes, but you're wrong. Krishna says, what does Krishna say? Bahavo jnana tapasa putramad bhavam agata. That many people in the past have attained love for me by following this process of bhakti yoga. So it's not true that it's not a science. Every time, everyone who does everything the right way gets the same result. But this experiment is very difficult. Or it's very difficult, it's challenging. You have to have all the places, all the parts in place properly, and then it happens. So, and it does happen, but you also have to be patient. And what happens when your experiment doesn't work the first time? If the original theory and hypothesis was very good, then you keep trying. And you keep trying. So when I went to chemistry laboratory, then, we were first mixing things, and it didn't work initially. That doesn't mean that just because it didn't work for me, well, it doesn't work. Because the chemistry professor is there, and he's telling, no, don't worry. People have been doing this for hundreds of years. Just keep doing it, and you'll get it right. You got to do the experiment the right way. And that's part of learning the scientific system, spiritual scientific system.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, a question is, you mentioned earlier on that this real knowledge that you're speaking of, it doesn't get changed or updated in reference to what Prabhuji was saying. But how do you then? How did you explain that within the this Gaudiyavation of tradition, we have scriptures that do get updated, and if you look at the scriptures that we're reading now, even Bhagavad-Gita, it has been updated from, let's say, 300 years ago from some acharya then, and they're giving another understanding on Godhead, and then it's a new understanding of Godhead. You go back to even older understandings, then it's even other different types of understandings. So,
no, but first, Bhagavad-Gita hasn't changed. So Bhagavad-Gita is the same Bhagavad-Gita that's been spoken for the last 5,000 years. So Bhagavad-Gita hasn't changed, and the explanation of the acharyas hasn't changed. So it isn't that Krishna's not God anymore, or it's not that we're not servants of God anymore, or it's not that the material energy is not constantly changing anymore. All that is the same. However, acharyas we change, the world changes. So to make knowledge contemporary and to make it relevant, then therefore it's presented according to time and place, but it's always the same. So the principles haven't changed. They remain the same.
Thank you.
That was somebody from online?
Harika?
Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. My question is, you mentioned the goal of life is to love God and to know God and to become lovers of God. But I need your help, and I'm a little bit confused on what it means to love God. Because sometimes we might look like lovers of God, we might take a spiritual life, but we are very impersonal in, we look like lovers, but do we really know how to love God? For example, in the Nectar devotion, it says that if the only form of love is if you love God, but anything else is not love. So for me, I look up to my parents, and I see their expression of love is when they're very personal. Sorry, I'm using this example, but one way my dad will show love to my mother is he will give, a kiss to her and support her. So is that love? Or is that lust? Or can we take that form of love and make it transcendental? Because I'm really confused. What does it mean to love God, and what does it mean to become actual lovers of God and not just dress like lovers of God? How do we...
It's a real science, and it's a relevant point. It's a real science. Atmendriya pritiyate vanchabolekya. Krishna diya prichidari premanam. So, real love means that which satisfies the senses of Krishna. If my mother, my father's interaction, etc., is directly connected to pleasing the senses of Krishna, then that can be reflected as at least connected to loving Krishna. But if it's disconnected, if I just see, well, Krishna's over there, and here's my wife, and here's my husband, and my mother, and my father, and my children, and my house, then love and my don't work together. So it can't be mine. Here we are. We're all living entities, and come together by chance. I mean, we're here together by plan, but ultimately we meet, we get to know each other by chance, and due to our own possessive nature, we start to say, this is mine. But it's not mine. One reason for that is that we're all going to die, and we're going to pass away, and we're going somewhere else. Just like that person that I call my father now was not my father in the past, and will not be my father in the future, so why is it mine? But rather I see, now here's a spirit soul who's a servant of Krishna, and I'm helping that spirit soul. I've taken a responsibility. Maybe I have this social and external identity of being mother, father, husband, wife. I have a certain responsibility that comes along with that to help this spirit soul advance and to move towards Krishna. That's very pleasing to Krishna. And that helps to actually cultivate real love. So, but of course, ultimately, loving Krishna is a very scientific thing. It requires a purification of the heart. It means rising up through different levels of devotion and bhakti, and ultimately to become free. Sagunan samatitaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate, to really become free from any influence of I, mine, possessiveness, etc., and just realize that I'm journeying through this world. But while I'm in this journey, I really want to be successful, and ultimately I want to end this journey and go back to Godhead. Now let me help as many people as I can. And Amara Agya Guru Hanetane Desh. So what the first people you should help are the people you're living with in the same house. If you can't help the people in your own apartment, then you're not going to help the people, who knows, on the other side of the world. So, and help them also to become lovers of Krishna. And give that facility. That's the most important thing. And if that means sacrificing material possessions, if that means a simpler life, if that means not getting overly entangled in a very complex business enterprise which is going to steal our time and energy, then sacrifice it. Let it go. It's not important. Career's not important. These things are not important. What's important is to learn how to love God. That has to be the priority. And it has to be not verbal, but you have to plan for that in life, because it takes time. And if, the answer to everything is, well, I don't have time to read Prabhupada's books, and I don't have time to chant 16 rounds, and I don't have time, then we're living the wrong way. We have to make time. And if we push it off till the end, but it's not a good philosophy, because we don't know when the end is really going to be coming. So it may come a lot faster than we think.
Thank you, Maharaj. We'll go few more questions. So this is from YouTube. How to make the scientific community or scientists understand their work is hurting and not helping?
Very difficult. They've invested a lot. This whole world is a real investment on this whole premise and this whole development of the economy, science, as I mentioned, education, politics. Everything is inextricably connected and tied up with this. This is like a Gordian knot. Well, you can see how many people are here, and of the devotees who are here, how many of them are convinced? So, and can it continue? Now, Prabhupada said it's not going to continue, but Prabhupada's not the only person who said it's not going to continue. There are many wise scientists, and there are a few wise scientists, and economists and others who say this is not going to continue. Even just paying everybody off in the UK to be good people and stay at home during the COVID is going to cost the next, who knows how many generations, a lot of money. And it's going to cause real economic complexity. I was just reading. Every day, 50 shops are closing in the country. So of course that's not due to that, but that's bringing an end to certain people's livelihood, their way of life. This whole world, and it's a point that we didn't come to, this whole concept of, first of all, economic development, growth, GDP. I mean, this is, sustainable development. This is like, the most misleading and most cheating concept that exists, that you can have such a thing as sustainable development. We're already not sustainable on this planet, the way we're living, and you think that we're going to actually be developing further. But we have that illusion and hope that is, and we're actually buying into that. But it's not sustainable, and it won't continue, and you have to be prepared for that. It's going to crash. It's crashed in the past. It's not just history, just look at history. And not going to be able to avoid it. Our lifestyle has to be different. It has to be a sustainable lifestyle. And that's one point that we need to bring back, that if we're going to talk about science, technology has always been there. There's always been technology. So in Mahabharata, they had technology. I mean, they had vimanas, they had nuclear weapons, they were riding in chariots going from one end of India to the other overnight. So they had technology, they had a lot of things. But generally the technology was quite simple. And it was technology that related to life, to those things that were really necessary for life, not things that went over the edge. I'll just tell that one story, that's there in Mahabharata, when Arjuna, after he allowed Agni to burn up the kind of a forest and eat the kind of a forest, then Mayadanava came and he wanted to give Arjuna the blessing, teach him yantra vidya. Now what exactly that yantra vidya is, but it's definitely the vidya, the knowledge of yantra, of machines, technology, technological knowledge of the demons. And he wanted to give that knowledge to Arjuna, who's not an ordinary person. And when Krishna was there, and when he heard that, he says, no, it will spoil everything. Now, if it's going to spoil everything for Arjuna, don't be surprised that it's spoiling everything for you. Because this vidya, this knowledge, is that yantra vidya which comes from down below. It's not what human life is for. It's not what's necessary for life. I existed without it. People existed without microphones. You hear Lord Chaitanya doing big Harinam Sankirtan with so many Sankirtan parties. They didn't have any amplification. So it's a facility, but we can live without it. What do we really need? And to bring back life to its need, that type of scientific doesn't need progress. It just needs basic things. This idea of scientific progress. Why do you need to progress when we're actually not really progressing? So it is actually a brainwashing. You have to understand this whole idea of GDP, scientific process, all of these things are brainwashed. This is like a 1984 scenario where everyone is being constrained into a certain psychological thing, and Krishna consciousness is meant to break free. And Srila Prabhupada was the most dynamic person who's actually, if you listen to Prabhupada, especially his conversations, his lectures, his morning walks, and so on, Prabhupada is trying to break us free from the confines of this crooked thinking that our minds have been tied into, to actually free our consciousness, free our way of life, free our way of perception, and to see things as they are, to really see reality. And unfortunately, that's the whole construct of society today. It is enslaving people. So, yeah, we need to be more than just Krishna conscious slaves. We need to break free.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marge, for that very insightful answer to that question. So we have maybe the Mataji there. Yeah.
Well, these devotees asking questions are sitting right in the middle of the melee. Anyway, but we're getting to you. And I asked Bhuta Bhavana to share some wisdom. I'm not giving anything different than what he would give. I'm just sitting over here, he's sitting over there.
Can you, sorry, we're requesting for those devotees who are going to ask questions if they can stand up as well. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna Swamiji. My question is about the current vaccination. And obviously scientists have also developed this vaccination and we're all taking it en masse, and just wanted to hear what you think about this or what you feel about this. Hare Krishna.
I really don't think about it, feel about it. I felt it 3 times when I got it in my right arm. I got number 1, number 2, and then I got the booster. So I felt it. I couldn't sleep on my right side for a few nights, but aside from that, it's too, for me, it's too unimportant an issue, too political issue. It's a waste of time.
So would you just say, chant Hare Krishna and just take the vaccine?
And make sure you're not going to sleep on your right-hand side.
Okay.
Thank you, Maraj. That was quite a succinct response there. Actually, before we go that side, is there anyone from this side? Okay. Yeah, that probably is you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My name is Santosh Das. Please accept my humble obeisances. You mentioned about universities, brainwashing, with the science that doesn't really get us anywhere. Do you have any initial thoughts on how we bring the science of Krishna consciousness into the so-called mainstream education?
Prabhupada was very interested. When he had offered, he was ready to be a professor at university. How you do it, you have to be quite clever. But certainly our society is becoming much more open than it was before. Especially here in the UK, it's more open than, for instance, where I just came from in Hungary. So, ever since the beginning, we used to start off with clubs, and that was one way, but that's voluntary, and then the other is to actually teach. They teach the topics, so they teach, but of course they don't teach from our point of view. And then we do have our devotees who are gradually, I guess I can say, infiltrating universities, who are actually become the endologists and so on, and they're giving the proper version of what Bhagavad-Gita is all about and what Hinduism is and what it represents, rather than someone else who really doesn't believe. That's one aspect in which that is going on, and we've got, Radhika Ramana, PhD amongst one, and others. We have our whole Oxford studies over here that's been very successfully doing that for a couple of decades now. So it's going on, but yeah, getting in there is a slow process. It's a very tight-knit community and very hard to break through. Especially our approach is different. Our approach is that, we accept a supreme authority and we're accepting this descending knowledge, whereas their idea is, quote unquote, they want to be unbiased and they want to just say, no, taking this sort of unbiased approach and presenting a academic view, a sort of cut and dried view of things without having any faith. But the fact is that you're talking about something that requires faith. So it's a very strange approach, this so-called objectivity of academia, which is actually not objective at all. It's again another type of cheating. There's nothing objective about it. It's prejudiced in a certain way, but they just use the English language and they call it objective. But it's prejudiced. It has a preconceived notion and an ideology. You can't talk about things that are faith-based without knowing what faith is and without sharing it and experiencing it, because it is a tangible thing, because there's nothing, just like we were talking about science. What does someone say? I don't believe in God. Well, what does that mean? That means your religion is that you don't believe in God. That's your faith. You're just saying the same. I'm saying I believe in God, and that's my faith. Though you haven't said anything different than what I've said, so why should I be charged for fanaticism where you're just as fanatical as I am? So similarly, everything that goes on, this whole experiment of modern, postmodern society, that science will make people happy, it's based on faith, and it's failing. And you don't want to recognize the fact that it's failing, despite the fact that the whole world is getting chaotic. You're getting flooded out here. We're getting no water in Hungary. New York City is submerged in water. New Orleans gets sort of destroyed every 5 years. Well, everyone's going to stand up and just accept the fact that we made a mistake and be honest about it. It doesn't work. What works? What works is how the Creator followed the design and it works. But if you go against the design, maybe you're going good for a little while. Isn't it the joke, this whole Afghanistan thing? You had the most powerful nation in the world, not just one nation, but many nations, go in, defeat this existing entities there who are occupying the country, or it's their country, whatever, defeated them in a matter of a couple of weeks. And after 20 years, they just come back in a very humiliating way. This phenomenally powerful countries have to depart, and in the process, they've armed all of these people. They've left behind billions and billions of dollars of armaments to even arm these people. This is called karma. I'm just bringing this up not from a political point of view. It's a karma. You cannot avoid karma. And this is a real example of karma. It doesn't matter what your might is. It doesn't matter your technology. It doesn't matter what you have. And these people they're not coming up with higher technology than the Americans. But still, the karma was on their side for whatever reason. And their karma is going to run out also. But you can see on the other side that also America's karma has run out, and now it's shifting over to China's side. And that comes with a different ideology. But it doesn't work. This kind, ultimately have to recognize. And if we don't, then when something doesn't work according to the design, sooner or later, it just sort of breaks down.
Guru Maharaj. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj, for that. So we'll take 2 more questions. So, okay, we've got an online question here. Certainly there are some aspects of science that have been very positive for instant advancement in the treatment of cancer, vaccines, etc. So shouldn't we give credit where credit is due?
Question is, I give credit. I have some very good doctors. Some of them are here in the UK. And I certainly have to give credit for their help. But if we just go, and of course in the design of the Creator, in Krishna's creation, there are doctors. Now, cancer, I don't know. I haven't studied Ayurveda, I haven't studied history of Ayurveda. Did cancer exist previously? Someone who's very well versed in that can say. But the real issue is, what is the cause of cancer? So, for instance, one type of cancer, which is, killing 5 million people a year, is lung cancer, and that's caused by smoking. So, okay, you've got lung cancer, but the problem isn't the cancer, the problem is that you're smoking. And people got cirrhosis of the liver, it comes from alcoholism, and you got, all these youths binge drinking throughout this country. And how much of the medical advancement is as a response to the illicit lifestyle by which people are actually living? So you're curing a problem, but that's not the real cure. The real cure is to change the lifestyle. And I had that graphic experience. I have Shambhi Hari over there sitting in the corner with me when I went through one of my health crises, and I used to have to go regularly to the hospital. This was in Hungary, and I was standing on the first floor of the ward waiting to get in to see my doctor, and as I was standing looking out the window, and downstairs I see all these patients, nurses and doctors smoking outside. And I'm thinking, why do I have to stand in queue? They're taking up all the doctors' time and energy. They're destroying the health system by their bad habits. I don't smoke. Why am I not given priority? That would be a real dynamic thing, really go down well in NHS, that non-smokers get preferential treatment, vegetarians get preferential treatment, etc. You'd really have a revolt. But that's actually what should happen. You want to kill yourself? Okay, we'll get in the back of the line. We want to talk to the people who aren't living a destructive habit, who aren't drinking, who aren't smoking, who are living in a controlled life, and who are actually not abusing their bodies. Don't they have a better right? So I'm just answering in terms of the fact that, yes, are we giving cures to the people who are abusing their bodies, who are abusing the system, who are abusing the design? Is that really advancement? And how long will it continue? You could keep saying, well, we're advancing and advancing, and the diseases aren't stopping. We could say it was a fantastic thing that within 1 year they rolled out a vaccine. Now, whether the vaccine's good, not good, this, that, but generally vaccines take 15, 20 years before they're actually approved and so on. And hopefully it really does work and doesn't turn us into robots and slaves of Bill Gates and things like that. I think they're living in some kind of twilight zone here when I hear these things. And so it was wonderful, but what was the real problem? And, no one's really quite agreed on where did this thing come from? Did it really come from that man is living in too close proximity to animals? But why are you living in too proximity to animals? Because you're eating them. And you're getting the animals' diseases, and most of the diseases of this century and the previous century are all coming from animals. So AIDS, and so which has killed 46 million, 146 million, something like that people. So you think COVID's bad, 2 million people have died. There are a lot more people died from AIDS, and AIDS comes from monkeys. Now, what are you doing with monkeys? Well, one thing is you're experimenting on them all over the world. Why are you experimenting with monkeys? So you experiment with monkeys, and somehow or another that karma is going to come by. Okay, now we cured AIDS. Now, isn't medicine very good? But why don't you just leave the monkeys alone and stop experimenting on them? And then you don't have to cure AIDS. So when we're looking at these so-called solutions and miracles that science have provided, are they really just bandages for all the problems that our lifestyle and science has caused? So Ayurveda is there. It covers everything that will come from naturally living in this world in a natural way, because you're material world, so it's inevitable that there's going to be things are going to break down, the body breaks down. But over and beyond that, it's enough. You had another, there were two. That's good.
Well, we're going to maybe take one more question. We can go to the live audience if there's a... yes, okay. And this could be a final question for today.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Hare Krishna Buddhavan Prabhu. Thank you for nice debate. One question which I'm struggling to find answer to is like why God has given us mind which is restless, which keeps thinking all the time, most of the time random thinking, and many times thoughts which are against us, not in our interest. I also know that Krishna has given answer that by practice and renunciation, abhyas and vairagya, you can control your mind. But why God has created the problem in the first place and then given the solution itself is so difficult. So thank you.
We have a mind. We have an intelligence. The soul thinks. The soul is rational. And the soul is sentient and has senses also. So this is who we are. Now the problem is that we feed so many unsavory things into our minds. And our minds are very, very powerful instruments for meditation, for self-realization. But if you stick the wrong things into your mind, the impressions will be there. And when you've got problems from them, it's because these impressions keep surfacing and coming back and combining with each other. So once again, that's off to lifestyle. Don't use this telephone more than you need to. Don't go on internet, don't start surfing, don't look at pornography, don't watch movies, don't listen to videos, don't influencers and so on. Forget all of this stuff, it's all trash. It has nothing to do with self-realization, it is unnecessary, but every time you do, it will make an impression. I give the example of, you've all had, you know, when you're kids and they just laid the sidewalk, they just put cement on the sidewalk and they put the tape around it so no one walks on the sidewalk. And what did you do? Walked on the sidewalk. And you left your footprint in the cement. That footprint is there. When that cement dries, so that's what the mind is like. You hear something, you see something, you smell something that's not conducive, it makes an impression, it's there. And it's very easy to step into wet cement, but it's very difficult to actually remove that footprint from dry cement. So when that impression is there, then you've got problems. Yeah, now I've got to start meditating, now I've got to purify my mind. It's very difficult because we're subjected ourselves to so many unspiritual, unfitting things that are against our own welfare. And that's because we're weak. We become affected by our environment. So don't, you have to choose a lifestyle. If you're serious about Krishna consciousness, you really can't be serious about videoing, YouTubing, telephone. So that you have to be reading Bhagavatam as much as you can, hearing Srila Prabhupada's lectures, chanting Hare Krishna, the minimum interaction that we need in the world in order to feed ourselves, and then as much time as we can, not even from this, because those impressions are there from the last life. Even when we lived a good life in this life, then we're still carrying so many lifetimes from the past, and that's not an easy thing. So, so live in the world. You're all here. We're all taking advantage of science, and I try to make that point. But don't. So fine, let's use science, but let's have the right to use science, and we use it only for as much as we need for spiritual advance, and don't be excessively dependent on it. Otherwise, yes, it's not the object that's so much the problem. It's the purpose for which it's used, and it's the people who are actually trying to brainwash us with their philosophy that this should be, yes, progress, 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 and further scientific development. It's not getting us to a good place. I mean, you're seeing how the world's changing. In your life, in the matter of a few years, you can see how the world's changing. And now, according to the scientists, it's gone past the stage of no return. The oceans will rise. There's no question about it. So if you've got relatives in Bangladesh, tell them to move. And maybe you've got relatives in Manhattan, they should move too. So the oceans will rise. It's just a question of how much. We've gone past the tipping point. Well, now a question of whether we go past another tipping point. So London, as far as I know, certain parts of London are also below sea level. So we have the barrages for a particular reason. It's to protect us from high tides. So we're really playing with fire. And I'll just depart, Prabhupada gave the example of what science is doing. And I've never seen it, but Srila Prabhupada said in India how they used to fell trees and cut logs, cut planks. So they would fell the trees, and then two men would have the saw, and they would, cut the planks lengthwise, cut the tree lengthwise. And then when it was, tiffin hour, then they'd stop. And you can't just leave the saw in there, so you have to keep having a peg in. So they would put a peg in there so that they can then continue sawing later on. And then along comes a monkey. And the monkey sits between the two open pieces of plank, and he starts fiddling around with the peg. So Prabhupada says, this is science. This is the scientists. They don't know what they're fiddling around with. But once they knock that peg out, they're going to become paratas, monkey chapatis. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Very deep, sobering words there from Maharaj. So, thank you again, both of you, Maharaj and Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu, for coming today for this wonderful session. Can we please give three loud Haribols? Haribol! 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 His Holiness Sivarama Swami Maharaj ki! His Grace Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu ki! So we're going to finish here today. So if you're interested more in obviously the wisdom that Maharaj has to give, Maharaj does have a very famous podcast, Sivarama Swami podcast. Please check it out online. Also, Maharaj routinely does lectures and seminars and workshops. And of course, Maharaj is also an avid, prolific author, writing on all sorts of things, from the deepest esoteric pastimes of Krishna all the way down to the social systems that have been designated in the scriptures, which will transform the social political landscape of society. So lots of things Maharaj has to offer. There is a book table here. So please feel free to check it out. There's also some prasadam available across. Plenty, right. There's plenty of prasadam available across the courtyard in the Sewa Hall. So feel free to partake. There's also some drinks, herbal teas and things like that on either side. So you can check it out. Now, again, remember, if you're going to go to Maharaj's book table, I know this is going to be a bit long, but just for the sake of the current situation, go round the periphery, please. I know it's like, why am I going around the periphery? Just please go around the periphery just to maintain the safety aspect. And of course, yes, we also have a School of Bhakti table there. We are here as part of the Mana Yatra trying to develop our education. So if anyone's interested in our courses, seminars, workshops, which are also related to our sessions, then please check out. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Oh, would you like me to reveal next week's guest with Maharaj, maybe? Would you like me to share? just to kind of keep them excited. Next week, Sutapa's going to be doing a session with you. Is that if I share it?
Next week is never running.
Yeah.
I don't know what I don't know.
He's asking. No, Sutapa Prabhu's booked to do a session with you on that. Would you like him to announce now for next week? Yeah. Hare Krishna. Sorry, one more announcement. As you know, we're going to have 3 more sessions every Sunday. Next Sunday, we've got a wonderful, very nectarian session coming. We'll put it on our online links and everything. And our special guest for next week with Marge is His Grace Sutapa Prabhu. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.